Hello, everyone. This is Super EV Master here, and welcome to the 2014 Federated Auto Parts Race Review. I review uh, the recent Cup race at Richmond, and since this was the last race before the chase, and now that the 16 drivers have been decided, uh, I'll be looking over that too. But meanwhile, let's just start with I don't really know I don't really know what happened with that Richmond race. It just felt like nothing worked. Nothing worked. I can't really remember a more boring weekend. I can't really remember a more boring NASCAR weekend in my life. Because on Friday night, Kyle Busch led every single lap. No one could pass him. He won that race. He's a Cup regular who won each race. So that's double bad for me. And then the Cup race, I don't know. I've noticed a trend. I feel like when all of Keselowski's wins this year, they've been on the most boring races of 2014. He won at Las Vegas. There were no wrecks. There were no wrecks at Las Vegas. And then he won at Kentucky. And I can't really remember anything at Kentucky with the exception of Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson blowing blowing tires and hitting the wall. Keselowski won that race. Uh, and then and then Keselowski won New Hampshire, and in New Hampshire the race seems pretty forgettable. But I do remember that Keselowski really deserved to win that race because you can make Keselowski restart anywhere in that race, and he can still get up to the front. So that win is understandable. And then yesterday at Richmond, I don't really know what happened. It kind of makes me really angry. But here's the thing: there were zero cautions for wrecks. All four cautions came out of debris. There were long green flag runs, and then when the race was over, people were lighting up the internet later that night and this morning and today, talking about and saying things like boring, and so on. Here's my thing. Here's my thing, and this is my thing for Richmond. NASCAR. If you're watching this for 2016, you got to get rid of one of the Richmond races. You have to, because with this, Richmond is not going to gain. If we after a race like this, Richmond is not going to gain a single new NASCAR fan. This is not going to help the attendance. This is not going to help anything at Richmond. So, and since your Richmond races seem to be and to me, your Richmond races are pretty forgettable. I can't, because I cannot really remember what happened at April, and someone could easily remind me in the comment section below. But I do not remember what happened in April, with the exception of finish. So NASCAR, if you're listening to this, just get rid of one of the Richmond races. I would get rid of the spring race and replace that race with a road course, because let's face it, these brokers races are way more exciting, action-packed than Richmond. But here's why, and maybe, and last night, I kept on telling myself and my parents maybe Richmond should not be classified as a short track anymore. But then again, that's kind of a pointless thing to say because it's less than a mile, so it has to be called a short track. But to me, Richmond is not. That race right there shows that Richmond has no short track qualities. Here's why: Richmond is not Bristol. Richmond is not Martinsville. If you compare Richmond to either Bristol or Martinsville, I think Richmond is much more wider than Bristol or Martinsville. So and I think that because I remember when I started watching NASCAR in 2007, and then my first full year was 2008. I remember looking at our tracks like Talladega in Michigan, and being so amazed on how wide they were, and thinking that these races would be so cool and something to watch. There are downsides to wide racetracks. I feel because the racetrack is wide, cars can go anywhere. There's a lot of room to race, so the action is really less, which is why sometimes Michigan races are not the most exciting races to watch, despite how wide they are and despite how fast cars go. But this is just my opinion. But yeah, so NASCAR, please just get rid of one of the Richmond races, because the closest we got to a wreck was Matt Kenseth hitting the wall. Because Matt Kenseth, I wrote down in my notes here. Matt Kenseth, he hit the wall at about lap 120, and that was kind of the only so that was the closest we got to a wreck. But yeah, but obviously, as I mentioned, if this continues, we're going. Richmond is not going to gain a single new NASCAR fan. People are not going to spend their like $75 or how many dollars it takes to go see a cup race for 3 4 hours if we have like no cautions, and I came up with this thing like, and I've been coming up with, like things like last week because I first saw this at like Atlanta before the cautions started to come out. Atlanta, that, like it kind of makes me like wonder. It kind of makes me like wish that like NASCAR. The NASCAR had some kind of like caution button, and if they hit that button, whether it's like a caution or not, you know, whether there's like a caution or not, they could just like hit that button and we can like reset the field because I don't know, I don't know, because and here's my theory because there have been articles before, there have been articles on like on why NASCAR has recently become so boring, and there have been articles on why there seems to be like less and less cautions. Here's my theory. I think I think the cars of today, the NASCARs of today, have better handling than cars 10, 20 years ago. So it allows drivers to not like lose control of the cars, and they drive the race. So there are pros and cons to having crashes and not. I feel like in some cases you may not want too much, but then you also want to have at least like some cautions because you want to see that like field, get bunched up again. You want to see um, you want to at least see something because cautions. I feel like that's me, in my opinion. Cautions are the way are ways to easily remember what happened here. Because when like a trucks like Daytona and Talladega, we'll constantly remember what happened at those races because those races are some of the biggest races of the year, obviously. But then they also have like the big ones to back it up. So so we could look at like the Coke 0400 this year and look at like lap 20 there was this huge crash that took out most of the drivers that were locked into the chase. So we can look at races like that. So cautions I think help us NASCAR fans remember on what happened. So so that's my theory. Better handling cars are the reasons for less cautions year after year. So yeah, I can say in a race like this, it shows why Richmond is my least favorite racetrack because because to me Richmond is kind of like racetrack of where either a lot can happen or nothing can happen, and today was nothing can happen. Maybe next year can redeem himself. Maybe next year will redeem it. Will redeem it. I don't know what. Okay, I lost my words here for a second. Maybe next year will redeem itself. The race is at Richmond next year. So who knows that? Oh well, but I'm glad the Richmond race is over, and I won't eh, until next year in April. So yeah, so there's my complaint and rant right there. But anyway, let's take a look at our fishing order here. So Bakazowski, he led 383 laps today, and I have noticed. One of the things I have noticed is that I think when like Bakazowski wins races these days, he wins them in dominating fashion. He doesn't. It's not like Bakazowski didn't dominate the race and then immediately lost the pass. When Bakazowski wins his races, he dominated them, which makes sense, because then that makes him the most deserving win. And I think Bakazowski, he deserved all 4 of his wins so far, and we're gonna expect more. I think Bakazowski, I think he has a strong chance of being in the Final Four and winning this championship. I think that this year is probably going to go in the Bakazowski way, and Bakazowski will probably get a second championship. But we have 10 more races to go. A lot can happen. It's the chase. Chase races can get pretty wild in some cases. But he led 380 laps, which is the most laps he's ever led, I believe, in a Cup race. So that's impressive. And I think he led the same amount of laps he did. I think he led the same amount of laps that Denny Hamlin did in the May 2008 race, but Hamlin did not win that race. So Bakazowski started first, finished first. Jeff Gordon, he started second. And actually, if you're following the NASCAR like leaderboard, he was actually catching Bakazowski in the final like 10 laps. So maybe if Gordon had like 20 more laps, he might have had a chance to actually pass Keselowski. Who knows? Clint Boyer, He came up third, almost made it in the chase. He pretty much had to win pretty much. Um, but I kind of wanted him to actually be in the chase. And then Jamie McMurray, he finished fourth here after starting 15th. So I thought like Jamie, and I also kind of wanted McMurray to win the race as well, to be in the chase. Harvick, he started fourth, finished fifth, and he was the only other driver to lead laps. He led 17, but this all came early on. And I feel like throughout the race, Harvick was struggling in traffic. Then we got Logano, another one of the drivers to watch for in the chase. We got Kurt Busch, Jimmy Johnson, which we'll talk about Jimmy Johnson dehydration thing in a moment here. Ryan Newman finished ninth. Eric Almirola, who won the Coke 0-100 as I mentioned earlier. Kyle Larson in 11th, and I'll just say it here. Dale Jr. 12th, Brian Vickers 13th, Kyle Busch 14th, Tony Stewart 15th, Dan Patrick 16th, Casey Kane 17th, Paul Menard 18th, Greg Biffle 19th, Austin Dillon 20th, Hamlin 21st, Edward 22nd, A.J. Allmendinger 23rd, 24th, Reed Sorensen. So, nice win for that team. 25th, Martin Truex Jr., 26th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 27th, Marcus Ambrose, 28th, Justin Allgaier, David Gilliland 29th, Cole Witt 30th, Justin Mears 31st, Josh Wise 32nd, David Reagan 33rd, 34th, Landon Castle, 35th, Mike Bliss, 36th, David Strimmy, 37th, Michael Nett, 38th, Alex Bowman, 39th, Travis Koffel, 40th, Joe Nemechek, 41st, Matt Kenseth, who, because of that tire issue, he hit the wall, and then he had to go to the garage like 10 laps after he hit that wall. 42nd, Ryan Truex Jr., 43rd, JJ Gilly. So, yeah. So when I look at, not really exciting race. I made a comment last night that said, like, I think that when we look back this year, I think that the race last night could possibly go down as like the worst race in 2014. In my opinion, and then someone replied to me saying, like, it could be this race or Kentucky, which I actually kind of agree. I think that, like, those two races were probably the worst races of 2014 so far. But who knows? Who knows? We could have an awful chase race in these next 10 races. Who knows? So, okay, so we can. Okay, so the Jimmy Johnson situation, I feel like, out of all the drivers who have raced in NASCAR, I never really expected Jimmy Johnson to have dehydration issues. I wonder why that is, because they said that, like, Jimmy Johnson was one of the most fit drivers in this sport. So I'm wondering what went on. I wonder if he couldn't. I wonder if he was having issues drinking water. I wonder if his water bottle was not filled up all the way. It's kind of a mystery to figure out, like, what happened, and I haven't really found it. And as of me doing this, I haven't really figured out what happened to him. All they said was dehydration. But most likely Johnson will be okay next week at Chicagoland. So yeah. And then the other thing we talked about, because I feel like, I made another comment, like, last night saying, like, like the Johnson dehydration, and then the man climbing the fence in turn 4 was probably the two highlights of the entire weekend, because, it kind of, the man climbing the fence, it kind of reminded me of the 2007 Watkins Glen race of where that drunk fan went onto the racetrack just to get an autograph from Matt Kenseth. Some of you may remember that, but you could go YouTube it to find out. So yeah, my guess is that, maybe the NASCAR fan, it was a shirtless guy who's probably in, like, huge trouble now. He's probably going to get, like, he may get, like, banned from the sport, and he may probably get, like, arrested. Either he could, as I mentioned, he could have been drunk, or maybe what he wanted to do was, like, cause a caution, and he thought, and maybe he thought, okay, if I climb the fence, that will bring out the caution, So maybe he thought of that, but who knows? So I think, the the guy climbing the fence was probably the main highlight of the entire weekend. Probably one of the most unexpected things to happen, but we have seen before. Uh, a couple decades ago, a couple of decades ago, a race fan hijacked the pace car at Talladega. So that's another thing that you could go YouTube right there. So yeah. Anyways, so now I'm into that. I want to talk about I want to talk about like 16 drivers entering the chase field as we're approaching on like 15 minutes right here. Okay, and when we look at this like chase field right here, okay, so we got Brad Keselowski, Gordon, Jr., Johnson, Logano, Harvick, Edwards, Kyle Busch, Danny Hamlin, Kurt Busch, Casey Kane, Eric Almirola, AJ Allmendinger, Matt Kenseth, Greg Biffle, and Ryan Newman. So those are our 16 drivers right here. When I look at the chase, I think I think we have a good top 16. If I were in charge of the world, I would take Almirola and Allmendinger out, and possibly take McMurray and Boyer into the chase. In the chase, but and that's kind of the thing. There, I feel like whether there are pros and cons. There are pros and cons to having a chase, and then there are pros and cons to not having a chase. In my opinion, and I came up with this like last week, that I think the reason why they added a chase in the first place was because they wanted to make the championship battle at Homestead really, really close. Because we looked at years like 2001. Jeff Gordon won his championship by like hundreds of points. You could have had easily crowned him the champion 7 races before the finale. And then we could look at like Matt Kenseth, who won the final regular, not regular, who won the final non-chase year. And he won his championship by like hundreds of points. I think what they want to do is that, with the chase, by resetting the points, it closes everyone back up again. So by the time we get to Homestead, the chase battle is at least a little more tighter than what it would be if there were no chase. And I think with this year with the new format, they want winning to be more. They want winning to be more, so they want those drivers to strive hard, to go to win. But then another downside is that I feel like sometimes it's possibly allow drivers to possibly not try as hard, because I feel like a driver could easily win and then not care, for how many races are left until a chase. So technically means that Dale Earnhardt Jr., after he won the 500, he really did not have to try to race hard, because he had already been locked into the chase. So yeah, so that's one example right there. But it's something to do. I actually like the eliminations. I think it's actually something that's really cool, because I think it has to be cool, because I feel like when we look at the past 10 years of the chase, we could look at races we could get to Charlotte, and we could easily be from the drivers who are way back right here, we could say we've been asking okay, what's the point of Carl Edwards being in the chase if he's not going to be in championship contention? So yeah. So I actually like the eliminations, but to me, I don't like how the point standings get reset for the final four drivers at Homestead. I can bring up a situation okay, so what if Brad Keselowski was good at every single track except Homestead? It would get tied, and it would kind of screw Brad Keselowski off. Or what would happen if if we had a caution with 20 laps to go here, and the downwind driver all race long, he takes 4 tires, and then his other competition takes 2 tires. And that wouldn't exactly be fair. I still believe in consistency. And when we look at the past 10 chase years, if we took those chase years and we're like, well, what if there was another dimension that had no chase? Five of the 10 chase champions would go to different drivers, and what that would mean is that, So instead of 4 championships, Jeff Gordon would actually have 6 championships. 6 championships. I believe Tony Stewart would have. I think Tony Stewart he would have like 2. Maybe Johnson would have 3. Carl Edwards would have a championship. Greg Biffle, I think Greg Biffle would have a championship. Or no, actually no. So so stuff like that. So the chase, so there have always been like pros and cons to the chase. Since some people like blame the chase for for the fall in popularity in NASCAR, but I think it's something that I think every single NASCAR fan will have to deal with. And I feel like that if you're gonna keep on complaining, you're probably stuck in the past. This is the future. This is this is the choice NASCAR made. So I think it's something that like everyone is going to have to deal with here. So I feel like that and I'll probably post a comment after this thing is over. But right now I'm going to do a thing right here, and you can post in the comments along with me here. What drivers do you think are going to be in that final round at Homestead, and what 4 drivers do you think are going to be the first drivers to get knocked out? Here's mine. I think the first, in my opinion, the first 4 drivers to be knocked out are Almirola and Allmendinger. I can say that because I don't think Eric Almirola won at Daytona. Well, guess what? Anyone can win at Daytona. Anyone can win at Super Speedways. And Eric Almirola has really not been a strong driver at any racetrack, with the exception of the super speedways. So I don't think Eric Almirola, he's not going to advance to the second round. So we could eliminate him. We could eliminate AJ Allmendinger. AJ Allmendinger, I don't think that he'll be strong enough to get past the challenger round as it is. Yeah, it's the challenger round. So I'll take those 2, and then I'll take. I'll probably put Biffle in there, and then my final driver. Kyle Busch. I don't think Kyle Busch. The problem is that Kyle Busch, he's kind of on the bad streak here. So I don't think Kyle Busch, unless he can get it together, I don't think Kyle Busch will be that strong. And when we look at our future tracks over here, Chicago, Chicagoland, I think watch for him on those mile and a half racetracks. I think that's where he'll be strong at. I think he could win Dover because he was a strong car at Dover back in June. So I think Kyle Busch, some of these racetracks, see that he does have strong runs at some of these racetracks right here in the chase, but I don't think that it's going to be enough. So my first 4 eliminated are going to be Almirola, Allmendinger, Biffle, and Kyle Busch. So those are my first 4. So I'll say that, and then my final 4 for Homestead: Brad Keselowski, Jeff Gordon, Joey Logano, and Kevin Harvick. I think those 4 drivers, at one point in the race, they were 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think they all have multiple wins. I think they have the ability to get it done. So I think Keselowski, Gordon, Logano, and Harvick. And I feel like that if it were to be one of those 4, I think the championship, I think it should go to Keselowski, and I think it will be Keselowski, but you never know. We still have 10 weekends to go, 10 races left, so a lot can happen. So yeah, and for someone who's a Jimmy Johnson fan, it would be it's kind of weird to not put Jimmy Johnson in that final round, which is the championship round. But I think I think if Johnson is going to get there, I think Johnson has to improve here. I think he has to. I think he has to win a race, in one of the first races, and I think he has the ability. He's won it. He's done good at Chicagoland. He hasn't won at Chicagoland, but he has shown strong runs. He's the all-time winner at Dover, so I think he could definitely get a good job at Dover. He won the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte. He has improved a little bit. He has improved on the super speedways. So we could see him be a shot at Talladega. We could see him win Martinsville. We could see him win Texas or Phoenix. He's won there. So a lot of these racetracks are going to go in Johnson's way. So maybe if Johnson could get a win, we could start talking about him being a championship contender. But who knows right there? And but we never know. We've seen years like 2011. We're heading into the chase. We didn't think that Tony Stewart would win the championship, and all of a sudden, when the chase started, that team was on fire, and they won the championship. So, so you never know. We could see a driver be pull off a Tony Stewart 2011 like chase year. So who knows what will happen here? And yeah, and that's what I think. So next week we're going to Chicagoland. In Chicagoland, I think Chicagoland, it's a cool racetrack. I think it's a cool racetrack because of its shape. Because if you look at its back straightaway, is curved, where most back straightaways are straight. So I think it's a cool racetrack for a shape outlet. But Chicagoland, other than that, Chicagoland, I think so. I think races at Chicagoland have gotten a little bit better, in my opinion. But I don't know, Chicagoland is kind of one of those like racetracks, much like Richmond, that I do not care for. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes because the sponsorship at Chicagoland is different this year. It's called the race is called myafibstory.com, which I don't know what that is. I don't know what my my I don't really know. I don't really know what that sponsor quite is. So yeah, so that's what I'd say with that. So yeah, and I think my prediction to win next week. I don't know. I don't know. Kent have won like last year, and we did see Calvish do. We did see Calvish have a strong card there like last year as well. So I think the winner for that race to me is unknown. I can't really seem to like pick a winner, but I think if I could pick one, uh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, Chicagoland, is similar to Texas, so I could put Jeff Gordon right there as a contender to win the race, but I don't know. Yeah, so I guess I don't have like a winner right now, but I guess if you want to predict the winner, you can post it in the comment section down below. So there we go. And I think now I'm going to end this race review at Richmond. And one last thing, to retrace back to the Richmond boring race or whatever. One person in the comment section on that video of um, on the video of Keselowski winning. One person told me that like at Richmond, they were just being like conservative and safe because it was the last race before the chase, and because the final spots, because it wasn't like a huge race, no one really had to like be like conservative or like race hard, but I'm really know NASCAR. You might just want to get rid of your Richmond races for 2016. Anyways, that's what I'll say. So that's my final thing I want to say. So thank you for watching this race review. If you have, make sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week with a race review and a live stream and much more content in the future. We'll see you all later, and bye.